morning, and thank you for joining us for the Eye on Beryl update. I am Andrew Laidley. Up first this morning, we have the Minister of Local Government and Community Development, Desmond McKenzie, joining us live to give us the very latest on what's happening in Kingston or within the country. Minister McKenzie, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me on your program. It's a pleasure to be here, despite the circumstances that we are expecting to undergo in the next 48 hours. Just a quick update.
Yes.
Presently, Port Royal is one of those communities that is high on our list that creates real concern. At present, a couple of buses from the JUPC along with the Jamaica Fire Brigade and various persons from ARPEM is presently in Port Royal for persons who want to evacuate to do so. The National Arena is a shelter in which persons from that area will go. I believe the cutoff point is 9 o'clock. Now, after the team has left Port Royal, if there are any calls about persons wanting to leave, the first respondent would have to assess the situation for determination to be made. But I would urge persons in Port Royal and that section of the corporate area, if you are watching me, it's not too late to get on one of those buses to go by the National Arena. The shelters across the country, 85% of our shelters have been activated, and so far over some 30-odd persons already in various shelters have been going into the shelter, so people are already starting to occupy the shelters. We will continue to work in various communities where we still need to massage the persons in these communities about the importance of moving, getting to higher ground. And we are seeing a favorable outcome on that. In the corporate area specifically, the KSMAC has been on the street calling the homeless population. So far, we are providing facilities. We have asked them for them to activate a shelter on the street that will house over 100 persons who are living on the streets of the corporate area. Now, I want to say to the country in this interview, it's not if, it's when. And it's not so long, soon, very soon. Want to appeal to Jamaica, those who still.
Yeah. What are some of the difficulties, Minister, you'd say that you've seen in terms of the evacuation efforts in terms of getting persons to comply?
Well, a lot of persons, those persons who are saying they're not evacuating, will tell you that they have been living there for years and not nothing. If it is to come and something is to happen, it is going to happen. So it is the same old say that we keep getting going over year and year. But I must confess that this time around we have seen less distance than the previous that. So it's an improvement, but you still have persons who are stubborn. You still have persons on the keys who tell you that where they live, it's not when they make difference that they move from one place where they can get flooding to go. So these are some of the things that we are seeing, but no one can deny that this government this time around has gone the extra mile in providing information, in providing the school persons, that persons understand that they have a responsibility, a personal responsibility to safeguard themselves and their family. The government can only do so much, and the government has been doing and will continue to do.
Minister, one of the things that we've certainly heard about in the past is that persons with disabilities are often forgotten or left behind. What kind of emergency alert system has been in place for persons like that, persons from the deaf community, for example?
Well, one of the good things about what this administration have done, we have been inclusive in all the sectors under the disaster risk component. So the various municipalities, based on the job that was done by YSEP workers 2 years ago, have been able to identify in communities persons who are physically challenged, persons who live by themselves. And inclusive exercise that we are doing, and some of our shelters have the facility to take persons who are physically challenged. I will admit that not all the shelters, because 9% of our shelters are schools, and not all of the schools are equipped in that way. But I will admit that, yes, there has been lack of interest previously before, but not this time around.
Minister, can persons expect notifications to be going out in terms of an emergency alert system, in terms of live alerts during the hurricane, in terms of like saying that their area is now inundated with water and flooding, for example? Can persons expect that kind of live update during the hurricane?
Well, outside of the live update, we have live early warning systems right across the country, in St. Mary, in Ellis, in Clarendon, in Old Harbour, in St. Catherine, the Benson Fording has it. There are a number of locations that we have early warning signals. In Montego Bay, there is an early warning system that speaks, that tells you when the water level gets to a certain point. The Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, working with the two telecommunications companies, Flow and Digicel, will be posting regular updates right across. The radio stations will be providing regular updates. The various media pages of government, the Prime Minister, local government, the Office of the Prime Minister, will be providing updates on a regular basis. And in fact, we have been working closely with the radio stations to provide information for the general public.
Yeah, well, certainly at a category 4, persons are expecting, that significant damage might be done to their land and to their properties and to their communities. What kind of plan or what kind of machinery would you say is in place? And if you could just detail that for me in terms of how persons could access that kind of support in the post-hurricane period.
Well, let's put it this way. What we have done, and it's a practice of the administration, is to post equipment in various areas that is known. So we have equipments that are located at certain points right across the country. So when the activities are over, persons will have an opportunity to have the benefit of work being done to make access available to communities. We have been in a position after as fast an assessment of the need, because that is not going to be possible in short order. But what I do know and what I can say to you, the government has made it necessary for relief work to be done to make access to areas that are impossible, to make access to those areas. And it's something that has been activated and
Yeah, Minister, currently we were just looking at some of the scenes of just Kingston outside of our studios here, and we're seeing where it's starting to, dark clouds are starting to gather, and, we're expecting shortly, based on the latest update from the Met office, that we'll start to really feel the effects of Hurricane Beryl. One of the things that we saw with our reporters on the road yesterday is that some of the gullies and some of the riverbeds are still quite heavy in terms of debris and in terms of garbage in the gullies. I'm wondering if your teams were able to really get into those areas and to manage some of that ahead of the hurricane hitting the island. What can you say in terms of those updates? We saw some very concerning images yesterday.
Well, we had a break in the transmission, so I was not able to gather the question that you asked. So if you could just repeat the question, because
right. No, so I was referring to some of the images that we saw yesterday in terms of debris in gullies and riverbeds, and I was just asking whether your teams were able to take a look at that and to see how best you could solve some of those concerns that citizens had ahead of Hurricane Beryl.
I don't want to sound controversial. What I'm seeing in our gullies and our drains didn't fall from the sky, didn't come to rains. It was built here by persons. And outside of what government can do, we also have a personal responsibility to ensure that we conduct ourselves in the right and proper way. Okay? And when we do this, and there is flooding, persons talk about lack of drain cleaning. Let me make the point that our drains were built to carry a certain level of water. Once we get excess water in our drains, regardless of how much drain cleaning is done, we're still going to have an overflow because the capacity of our drains would have been exceeded based on the amount of rainfall that we have. National Waterways Management Authority has been working 24 hours in certain communities across the country to try to remove garbage. It is not an easy task, but it is something that we are managing, and I think we have been doing a pretty good job of it. If you look at the work that has been done to clear the mouth of the sandy gully, for the first time, one can stand up and look straight down in the sandy gully because of the work that has been done.
Yeah, well, Minister, certainly some critical work has been done, and of course the nation appreciates the work that you and your team has been doing across the island, and we are, grateful ahead of this hurricane that we are about to endure. Minister Desmond McKenzie, Minister of Local Government and Community Development, thank you so much for joining us here on CVM's coverage of Iron Beryl.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on your program.
Thank you, Minister. Be safe. So as we continue our live coverage of Hurricane Beryl, we wanna give persons and Jamaicans some tips about the hurricane and how you can stay safe during this time. And one of those tips is to always ensure that you have an emergency communication system. Make sure that you have everything you need to get in touch with your family, and either through cellular phones or via email or some means of communications, just to ensure that you are always communicating with someone during this time. We also want to ensure that if you have any illness or any medical conditions, you want to ensure that you have those medications. You want to be equipped to tend to any current or unexpected medical conditions your family may have. And this is where we are at the moment. Beryl is expected to maintain major hurricane strength as it passes near or over Jamaica this morning. The storm is then projected to move towards the Cayman Islands. So and Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Despite some intensity, Beryl still poses a significant threat, with winds reaching up to 145 miles per hour. Now that's about 230 kilometers. Now, for various regions in the area will be affected. The National Hurricane Center has issued warnings for various regions in the storm's path, including Jamaica and Grand Cayman. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Andrew Holness has declared Jamaica a disaster area for the next 7 days as Hurricane Beryl approaches the island. The measure will remain in force until July 10. Following on the declaration, an island-wide curfew will be in effect from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. today, July 3. The Prime Minister says the curfew is to ensure the safety of everyone during the passage of the storm and prevent any movement with the intent to carry out criminal activity under the order. Except for specified persons, everyone is directed to remain at an abode or place of residence, which includes a national shelter during the designated hours.
Jamaica must take this hurricane seriously. As we brace for the potential impacts of Hurricane Beryl, we also need our Jamaican household, our Jamaican family, you, to be prepared. It is imperative that we remain calm. Now, it's not a time for panic. Now, here are some very important steps that each of us should take to ensure our safety and the safety of our loved ones. First thing, stay informed. Regularly check reliable sources of information, getting your updates on the progress of the hurricane. Tune into your local news stations, listen to the radio, and follow official social media channels such as the Jamaica Information Service for the latest information. The Met Service and the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management will provide timely updates. Second, create an emergency plan. Discuss with your family and loved ones what actions to take in the event of an emergency. Identify your strongest room in the house, your safe room, where you can take shelter during the storm. Ensure that everyone knows the location of emergency supplies, such as flashlights, batteries, and first aid kits. This can be a particularly fearful time for our children. Take some time to reassure and comfort them and explain to them what is happening. Third, stock up on essential items. By now, you should have your emergency supply kit with enough food, water, medication, and necessities to last for at least 3 days. And this should include items such as non-perishable food, bottled water, your prescription medications, toiletries, and important documents should be in waterproof containers. Fourth, secure your property. Take steps to protect your home from potential damage. You should, by now, would have already pruned the trees around your home, and you would have secured loose items that could become projectiles in high wind. Given the projected strength of the hurricane, protecting your roof is a critical part of your preparations. Fifth, know emergency numbers. You should familiarize yourself with emergency contact numbers and have them readily available.
Now, acting DCP in charge of strategic operations, Warren Clark, has given an update that the constabulary's incident command centers are activated. Now, this means that the JCF will be maintaining order and securing property throughout the passage of Hurricane Beryl.
JCF is fully deployed island-wide to secure critical installations and scheduled premises, ensuring the safety and security of these vital locations. We are prioritizing the security of key infrastructures, including Petrojam, airports, business districts, hospitals, major road networks, the courts, prisons, and scheduled premises. The JCF, in collaboration with the JDF, will monitor these locations throughout the storm. Let me assure you that the JCF, led by Commissioner Dr. Kevin Blake, is fully prepared and dedicated to safeguarding the lives and property of all Jamaicans during this challenging time.
You're watching CVM's live coverage of Eye on Beryl. We take a quick break. We'll be right back.
internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winford Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVMTV.
So much more than entertainment.
Fitness, brought to you by Your Plate and Nature.
Welcome back. You are watching CVMTV. We are keeping our eyes on Hurricane Beryl in our special program that's going to be taking you through to the end of the storm. We here at headquarters are hoping that you and your loved ones are being safe and, well, somewhat responsible in this hurricane season, because we know that these are dire times. We have...
I'm also joining Nika. Of course, Andrew Ladley.
Is me joining you?
We've been bringing the nation updates so far about what's happening outside. If you just look outside your window in Kingston, where we are, you can see the clouds have started to gather. Those dark and ominous clouds are in fact coming in. And a while ago we spoke with the Minister of Local Government and Community Development, and we're seeing sections of the Sandy Gully right now on your screen towards Red Hills Road. And Nika, as you're seeing there, we've seen that, you know, the gully is starting to fill up already.
I don't know if I'm going to be presumptuous and say fill, but I can see that there is some amount of cleanliness at play.
Yes,
the gully appears to be clean. So kudos to the local government ministry and team. Yes. But I don't know if some of the debris have already been washed down further. So let us hope that it maintains its position and it does what it's supposed to do during this hurricane season.
Well, here's the thing, right? So I spoke with a couple mayors yesterday, and they expressed to me that, you know, their teams have really been out there in the field and really putting in the work. Certainly you saw some of the reports yes.
Yes.
from our reporter, certainly Ramon Gordon who showed us a riverbed yesterday evening, you know, hours ahead of the impact of Hurricane Beryl, and that was concerning.
It was indeed, Andrew, because that community is almost repeatedly in spate after major rainfall or any event like this. And so I'm beginning to wonder if there needs to be more than just talk around hurricane season in some spaces and way more preparation, just because communities like those are going to be at risk one way or another. It doesn't require a hurricane.
Yeah, and we've...
So we have more image of Kingston coming in, Andrew.
Yeah. If you see there,
very little happening on the roadways.
Yeah, well, there's a curfew in play right now, right?
Yes. That's Dunrobin Avenue in Kingston, very close to CVMTV.
Yeah, and we're looking at, you know,
a typical Wednesday would never be this sparse. Yes.
Yeah, and as you can see, Nika, the picture is a bit shaky because of the wind and the gusts outside, so that has started.
We did experience some of that earlier today.
That is
true. So we went outside Jamaica because we wanted to see what was happening, and when we got there, well, Andrew,
we were, I would say we were almost blown away, but it was certainly more windy than usual.
And we didn't see as much rainfall, but I'm sure it's the calm, as many have said, before the storm. So we have...
Yeah, so as you know, our reporters are all across the island, and of course we'll be checking in with them for the very latest on what's happening in their area. I think now we have our reporter Trisha Gay Kelly, who will be joining us. Trisha, can you hear me?
Trisha Gay Kelly here, reporting once again from the Helsha Bay Beach in Portmore, St. Catherine. Now an update today, the sea is very rough. Water has started making its way on land, and it doesn't look good for the residents and business owners down here. There are clips of water literally joining around the buildings. It's not safe. There's debris coming inland as well. The waves are very heavy. Not sure if you can see it in my background, but the waves are crashing in. So far, residents have advised us even to leave. There were police officers here earlier, and they have tried to evacuate as many people as they can, but we were told that it's one way, one out. So we are also leaving soon. We'll also be leaving. The business owners are packing up right now. Some people are even moving out. We have seen that so far. And it's getting worse. The sky has darkened since. The waves are getting heavier. More things have been drawn into the water, and debris is filling the land. The water is literally still on land, so it's making its presence here. So we're about to get out, and that's about it. But we'll give you our next update as soon as we can.
You know what, Andrew? I looked at that report, and thank you so much, Trisha Gay. Please get out. If your home is in spate, do not hesitate. I've come up with a rhyme. Evacuate.
Yeah. And you know, Dika, it's been a perennial issue in Jamaica, right? Persons, and you understand, you know, persons want to ensure that their properties are secure, their assets are secure. And you know, there's been a history of looting during this time when persons are vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Homes are empty. So you really can identify and understand where it's coming from, but there's nothing that you can really do in terms of when a hurricane like Beryl is coming, and I mean, you're gonna have to safeguard your life. First and foremost.
Life is far more valuable than property in this case, because where there is life, as Jamaicans have always said, there is hope. And so if you have lived through Beryl, you've lived through Gilbert and all the other major hurricanes that we've heard about growing up, certainly where there is life, there's an opportunity to rebuild, there's an opportunity to rebrand and to restart fresher.
Yeah.
We are Caribbean people and we're resilient, so we will overcome Beryl and all the others.
And as you've said that, just to put things into context, I mean, this Hurricane Beryl is unprecedented in certain ways, right? I mean, we've never had a hurricane this early on in the season, of this magnitude. And it's an indication that the Caribbean is in fact more vulnerable than ever before in terms of natural disasters. I mean, we're experiencing climate change, hotter weather patterns. I mean, the Caribbean is more hot than ever before.
True.
So all of these things are coming together to present this kind of weather system that we have right now. So I mean, if we thought it was a joke before, it's certainly become more clear to us that the Caribbean is more vulnerable to climate shocks now more than ever. Yeah. So Nick, I believe we are connecting now with Natalia Clark, another one of our reporters. I believe Natalia is in the St. Thomas area. Natalia, can you hear me?
We are in Duenipen, which, as you can see, is already severely flooded. We were told at least 20 people live in this vicinity, and wow, this is meters deep. We have a fallen tree here. We have people here still trying to get their stuff out. We have a family seeking refuge in this truck. Wow, there's water in my water boot. This is deep. This family in a truck. This is Duenipen. This house is completely inundated. Meters deep water. This is the sea. It's windy. We were told most of the residents have already evacuated.
Well, thank you so much, Natalia, for that report from St. Thomas. Now, Nika, like, it's still early days yet, and you're seeing meters high water that Natalia was showing us just now.
It's eerie. How much more can communities like these take when we get the real hit? How much more?
And it's what we were talking about a while ago. We saw persons in and around Natalia a while ago. There was a family, I believe, in a vehicle there, and it's shocking because, I mean, at this point when you can still get out, persons are still sticking around. And just look at the trees that have fallen.
That's a grown ackee tree, and we know almost every yard or household in Jamaica is close to an ackee tree.
Yeah.
So if we're close to ackee trees, if we're close to mango trees, because it's heading into the summer, we have guineps, all sorts of fruits, and some properties are heavily fruited. So can you imagine the sort of devastation that could be left behind? But what we're saying, Andrew, as we've said before, if you are fearful, your home is in spate, don't hesitate, evacuate. I'm on that. I will not stop, because it is imperative that Jamaicans get to the place where we understand there is nothing that can compensate for your life.
For your life. Look at that house. And we're seeing images here that looks like Helsha.
Yes, that looks like Helsha.
That seems like Helsha. And of course, we're seeing the waves coming in.
So that was where Trisha Gay was earlier.
Yes, that's where Trisha Gay was.
And I don't see much of a barrier preventing any major damage or devastation in that space, because over time, the sea has almost started inching in closer and closer to land, and so very few people even visit the space anymore because they fear that there's not much to enjoy at the space.
Well, there isn't, right? And it's that question of inherent vulnerability that we were talking about just now. We're looking at the road to Grand Spen in St. Thomas. We're seeing images there of Trafalgar Road in Kingston. Like I said, our reporters are all across the island. We are in fact bringing the nation live coverage as it unfolds across the island. We're seeing that must have been drain cleaning there of the Sandy Gully.
Absolutely. I'm not going to be overly bashful today and say the government or the authorities should have done this before, because we have a culture in Jamaica where if you clean it today, somebody is going to justify the old fridge, the old stove, the Pampers, and all the other things that we'd fear the trucks don't have a right to take from our gates because the garbage is too good for the truck. So we put the garbage in the gullies. And the closest gully to you most times might be the sandy gully. The bigger the gully, the bigger the garbage that we throw in it. So we have to do better as a nation. It's a wake-up call for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nika, like sometimes when I look at it, it's definitely a societal change, a mindset change that needs to happen.
You're right.
You know, we've spoken to several authorities and they've harped on this, that we can only do so much and no more. There's at a certain point, the citizenry has to play their part.
You're in fact very correct. I'm not sure what our producers have lined up just right now, but I did a little bit of tweaking and researching before I got here, Andrew, because you know I'm a student of science.
We need to go down into the history.
And I want to go down into some granular details about the history Jamaica has had with hurricanes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with the fact that we've been having hurricanes before hurricanes were even being given names.
Well, that's a part of our inherent vulnerabilities, as an island nation in the tropics.
Exactly. And this is from as far back as the 1500s.
Wow.
So
Nika, where were you in the 1500s?
Non-existent. Somewhere far from here, I think. I wasn't born. So we've had quite a history with hurricanes, and as we got closer to the 20th century and into the 21st century, I'm going to just share a reminder of some of the massive ones that we've encountered.
Yeah.
We can't go without talking about hurricanes like, what's the biggest one you remember?
It would have to be Hurricane Ivan for me. Like that
your age
one,
is showing,
so,
Andrew. Your age is showing.
Well, I recall, Nika, I cannot forget that I was living in the East Rural St. Andrew at the time, and the bridge, the Harborview Bridge, that's when that bridge broke. That's when that bridge, broke away, and so
it must be frightening.
And so we were marooned on the eastern end of the island, and we just could not get to the rest of the island, because that's a major thoroughfare in terms of connecting the parts of so Kingston. And on screen we're seeing the path that Ivan took, Hurricane Ivan, that I was just speaking about.
Of course. Let me tell you a little about Hurricane Ivan. So Hurricane Ivan was a Category 4 hurricane when it made landfall September 10 and became Category 5 by September 11, the next day. So we saw communities in some parishes badly damaged. The Portland Cottage community in Clarendon was destroyed. Over 18,000 persons were left homeless and 17 persons were killed. Roads were washed away due to mudslides and flooding. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Rivers.
I saw bridges being washed away.
Well, you lived that.
I lived it.
I can tell you at this time, 2004, so you were on the eastern end of the island.
Yes.
I was on the western end of the island.
What did you see?
I don't remember. I'm not going to lie, I don't remember, but I believe this was the time when my mother sent me to the supermarket in Albertown, Trelawney, to get kerosene, because we were very convinced it was going to be the end of us.
Yes, yes.
And we lived in the cockpit country. So despite the hilly terrain, we also had quite a bit to fear, because landslides, mudslides, all of those things would have impacted us. And our roads are rather snake-like. So one boulder can eliminate contact with the rest of the parish and all of that. And we are up in the southern section of Trelawney. So you're closest to perhaps Falmouth Hospital, but you're not so close. And then you're closer to Manchester, depending on where in the southern section you're located. But getting to Spaldings might be a difficulty, because those roads are also very, very narrow.
Yeah, and as you so our experiences weren't too different, even though you were in the west and I was in the east. It was pretty much the same.
Absolutely.
And I recall, Jamaicans are very entrepreneurial. Like, one of the things, Jamaican parents are very, bent on ensuring that we get a proper education. So my mother was just like, you are going to school regardless.
No matter what.
And so there were men. No, I'm not encouraging anybody to do this.
Actually,
but I mean, there were persons carrying us across the river to ensure
river that nobody
we could,
can cross.
That, I'm not sure it was that river,
okay.
but we got to school, and every single day, there was these entrepreneurial men.
They collected funds. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
We'll have hustlers. That's something you will never lose here. So they say rivers and other water bodies overflow their banks, resulting in damage to roads and infrastructure. It is like somebody once said to me, whenever the JLP is in power, expect a major storm. And I say, is it a curse? What is it? Because millions were just spent on the North Coast to redevelop and renovate and repair sections of the tourist hubs. You had Westmoreland destroyed, all of that, but here we are again. So Ivan is what you can remember.
That's what I can remember, Nika.
Nobody cannot forget Gilbert. So if you cannot... We have Gilbert... The path of Gilbert on screen, actually.
And it's not much different from the path that Hurricane Ivan took. The path
and the one that looks like Beryl is now taking.
Exactly. But Gilbert was a whole other thing. Certainly, I wasn't around for that.
Let me give you the raft of things we found on Gilbert. It's actually the longest captioning and history that we have from all the hurricanes that I found from the 1500s. So this was 1988, September 12. Hurricane Gilbert, otherwise called Wild Gilbert, otherwise called the Leveler. That is when the song came out, water coming in my room.
Sweep out some with me broom.
We get it. You heard the song. So Hurricane Gilbert was the 7th named storm of 1988. It was a direct hit to Jamaica. It said that hurricane winds lasted approximately 10 to 12 hours, with the eye passing through directly over the country. Jamaica's banana industry lost some 400 million in export earnings. The entire 7,500 acres of the crop of export bananas had been wiped out.
Yeah.
That was Gilbert. We don't have to touch tourism and other areas of the country's economy yet. But tourism and mining were also disrupted, and a fact that gave rise to income losses and decreased foreign exchange earnings, according to my research. So we're going to show you something now, because we want to juxtapose Gilbert and Beryl and the path that one is taking and one took.
That's dangerously close, Nika.
Too close for comfort.
Far too close for comfort.
And let's not forget, Gilbert, number of deaths was low considering the intensity of the hurricane, with only 45 dead in Jamaica. 45 dead in Jamaica and hardly any injured. Already, Beryl has claimed at least 6 lives.
Yeah, across the Eastern Caribbean.
Just spanning the Eastern Caribbean, heading to us. And Beryl seems to be excited about visiting us because she keeps going up, coming down in her categories. I see when she slows down over the water, she gets really intense and picks up speed, and she's heading to us with almost a vengeance. So I'm not sure what's attracting them.
And it's a different time now in terms of the climate and, the kind of things that
it's very conducive.
These kinds of weather systems.
It's a perfect system for a storm. This is well over storm in a teacup, more than that. They said that under Gilbert, there was floods were perhaps more damaging than the winds. The food stores and supermarkets were looted. And that is one of the things that I believe left many Jamaicans so wounded and so scared when they hear of another hurricane of a similar pattern resembling Gilbert. It's harrowing to think that people were in homes. My mother certainly recounted the stories to me because I was merely in the womb. And that doesn't tell you my age, Jamaica.
It does a little.
Goodbye, Andrew. Goodbye. But what I can say is that they mentioned how they had to flee different houses to get off the hill on which they lived to the closest shelter, which was a nearby church. And to get off that hill, the risks were high. And they spoke about how the conditions were in the shelter, and it was so jam-packed because so many people lost their homes. Persons' roofs were just lifted and thrown aside.
Yeah, just tossed. And I can't forget how my own parents would would recount that experience, it was almost as though Gilbert came and left and came again.
Oh yes, we heard about that.
Yeah.
We heard about.
so it's almost as though Gilbert was determined to stick around in Jamaica for some time. And I was having a conversation with some of our colleagues earlier, Nika, that we can in fact take some solace in the fact that infrastructure has changed since then. Building codes have changed since then. So we have referred to Gilbert as the great leveler, as you opened, your story with. But many things have changed since then. So we're one could say on sturdy ground, and we could fare better, as you've said. But it's still a dangerous hurricane.
It is.
And it's still not to be taken lightly.
Absolutely not. And when you look at what it did to countries like St. Vincent, the Grenadines, Carriacou, Petit Martinique, Grenada, into St. Lucia, all of that should resonate with us here in Jamaica. We were watching Beryl for quite some time. I never thought that Jamaicans could really look at that damage and the aftermath and say, this is going to be a walkover for us. But then we sometimes take things for granted because we are a praying nation. Yeah. Conveniently, of course.
But you see, Nika, the more things change, the more they remain the same. We've seen the same kind of response over the years in terms of, okay, so we've heard that a hurricane is coming and persons rush to the supermarkets. Of course, I remember one of our reporters was saying, everybody's going for the bread. Nobody's trying to get water. Everybody's going for the bread. And of course, I know Jamaicans have stacked up on many things, but the shelves are empty when it comes to the carbs aisle.
Well, we're getting more footage out of St. Thomas. This is actually White Horses St. Thomas. So we should be seeing that pretty soon on screen. But let's go to Natalia.
This is the road, and by all indications, this stretch of the highway probably will be impassable in a few hours. Waves are already reaching up to the road. It's 10 o'clock.
So Hurricane Beryl, thank you so much, Natalia, for that update from St. Thomas. Hurricane Beryl is in full swing. That's in the area of Roselle in St. Thomas. And as you were able to see there, the waves are crashing in, and it's debris on the road. It's not so much that the road is damaged or destroyed, but it's the debris that's there, and we're seeing a lot of rocks in the roadway.
So you know the terrain, Andrew.
Yes.
They describe for us the roadway, the landscape, because that seems to be a hillside I'm looking at on the left of screen, and the sea on the right. So that's the ocean coming in, and as you can see, it's rough waters right now, and the images that you're looking at are images that were taken moments ago from Natalia in the Roselle area in St. Thomas. And of course, what we're seeing here is the impact that the hurricane is having on the ocean. And, you know, one of the things, Nika, is that Jamaicans, most of Jamaica, habitation happens along the coastline. Now that makes us even more vulnerable when we experience hurricanes and storms of this nature. Absolutely.
Because also what has happened over the years is that the coral reefs have broken down. And the coral reefs are supposed to protect us from
a barrier of sorts,
a barrier of sorts,
barrier.
correct, from
and
harsh waves.
Too.
And so when these things happen, we've seen it happen in Helsha, for example. And so what you're seeing here is we're no longer able to protect our coastline, right? And so the waves are crashing in. The waves are crashing in, and communities that live that are along the coastline are more susceptible to these kinds of things. We definitely saw some of the images there. There's Hellshire again, where Trisha Gay Kelly was. We spoke with her earlier, and as you can see, the water has already started to come in.
Absolutely.
I mean, that must be terrifying.
It seems absolutely has tied my tongue because so many things are on point. What we're seeing now looks like.
That was before. That was the Rockford area.
Okay. So this is Grand Spen.
Right.
Heading into St. Thomas, New Kingston.
Right.
This is Roselle.
Right. The Roselle area. So it's important to recognize, Nika, that a conversation must be had. I've been speaking about vulnerability in terms of small island developing nations.
Yes.
And what that means is that the countries like Jamaica are vulnerable in a number of ways. We're vulnerable because of our size. Or smallness, right? Or our economy cannot support certain kinds of disasters. But I certainly think that Jamaica has done well in terms of preparing for these kinds of disasters. And you've heard the Prime Minister over time, yes. And you've heard the Prime Minister speak about it in terms of the kinds of insurance we've been paying into. And certainly Jamaica has more reserves than at any other time in our history. Now, I will say the finance minister has been hesitant about tapping that fund. I spoke with some business interests yesterday who they were saying that, Mr. Minister, you could tap into that just to ensure we don't have to, because we've been having inflationary conditions that has made it difficult.
If we're going to be fair, it's the first in the hurricane season.
It's very early, and there's another system behind Beryl.
Yes, I was just about to tell you about Mr. Chris. This is Mr. Chris beating down on Barbados. So we're going to take a quick look at what's happening in Halfway Tree right now. This is CVM Sky Cam, because we're showing you a bit of the bus park along Eastwood Park Road coming from Maxfield Avenue. Maxfield Road.
It's interesting. What we're looking at is that seems to be the side of Maxfield Avenue that we're looking at there. But Nika, it's interesting to juxtapose what we saw in St. Thomas with Natalia.
Yes, and what's happening here.
And what's happening here in Kingston. And that's just how these systems, unfold, especially on an island nation like Jamaica. I believe there are some cleaning activities happening along Spanish Town Road. We're seeing images of that happening as we speak. The last minute preparations are happening. And Nika, we didn't